Welcome to Resilience Unravelled. Hi everybody and welcome to Resilience Unravelled, a podcast that examines all aspects of personal and organisational resilience. A huge all-encompassing subject that covers the ability to thrive in life by harnessing your cognitive, emotional, physiological and contextual abilities. I share stories from people who have thrived despite remarkable obstacles, as well as highly successful practitioners and experts across a range of topics. And this podcast introduces their amazing stories and expertise, as well as my own reflections, perspectives, strategies and tips, which come from my own synthesis of themes and trends from wider learning. You can go to qedod.com/extras to access offers, tools and resources, including free articles and ebooks. For those of you that would be interested in supporting our work and contributing more proactively, you can find our new Patreon page at patreon.com. Then search for Resilience Space Unravelled. So, let's get started. Enjoy the show. So hi and welcome back to Resilience Unravelled. Today I have another guest, Donnalynn Riley by name. Now that's a brilliant first name, isn't it? Donnalynn Riley. That's like two names for the price of one. So good afternoon, Donnalynn. How are you? Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm very, very pleased to be here. It is kind of two names for the price of one, which is kind of nice.
It is showing off, some might say, but
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't be the one to say that, obviously. And
Right.
I can tell from the accent that you're the last person who was on my podcast. You know what? They were I think 8 miles away from me, but I'm suspecting you're further away than that.
Quite a bit.
Come on then, where are you today?
I am in Massachusetts. Oh, can you believe it? I didn't realize it was in the room with me. I apologize. So I am in Massachusetts in the United States. So quite a few miles away.
Yeah. So is that lobster country? That's where all the lobsters come from?
So yeah, so on the coast you can get that. I'm actually about 2.5 hours inland. So it's beautiful. They call them the Berkshire Hills here. We have beautiful hillscapes, and this is the time of year that we have beautiful leaves turning colors, and it can't get better than this moment and the last 4 months, and then it turns to snow and it doesn't stop for a very long time.
Yes. There's that very famous Family Guy sketch, isn't there, when the first leaf goes brown and then there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people arriving in cars, aren't there?
That's what used to happen here. Absolutely. Yeah. That's right.
Well, lovely. Thank you for joining me today. Tell me what it is you do, or how would you describe what it is you do?
So I would say that I help online entrepreneurs of all sorts to see their business in a spiritual way, to use spiritual tools, emotional tools to solve their business problems. So what happens is often we feel like we have a problem, like I can't choose between this software service and that software service, or whatever that really tangible problem that's in front of you is. And what happens often is that there's actually an inability to have a good decision-making process, or be able to really tap into yourself to know what you want out of the situation so that you have a guiding light. And there's of course, people bring all their baggage with them too. So there's past things that may be impacting the way that you are making decisions in that moment, and whether those decisions are really good for your business. So taking this spiritual approach, as I do because I'm a spiritual health coach, really allows you to take a step back and make better decisions for your business.
So there's a lot to talk about there. So I'm guessing it's not just for owners, it's anybody in business, because if you're making decisions, it doesn't matter what level. I'm guessing you can be an employee, you can be a public sector worker, you can, it seems to be that decisions are decisions in a way, but I understand that that's your focus. Now, you've mentioned the dreaded S word already, and a lot of people are already heading for the hills going, oh my goodness, we're going to be lectured on goodness knows what now. But what is a spiritual health coach?
Okay, so this is a good question, because most people go, wait a minute, is this religious, you know? And when you work with me, certainly with my background, I'm a licensed spiritual health coach, so I have a lot of background in it. It really doesn't require any kind of religious belief at all, right? That we are really doing work between you and you to get answers, right? So I know that sounds a little funny, you and you, but it's internal work to be able to really tap into those answers and have mechanisms. Like there are real tools to use. It isn't sort of, a lot of times people feel like, oh, that's woo-woo and I don't know what to do there. And oh, they told me to meditate and I don't really know what I'm doing, right? But if you can get some real concrete tools, then you can move forward quite easily and practice those tools.
Okay, cool. Love this. Now, I'm a psychologist, so I tend to work down the neuroscience, scientific side of things, but I'm actually very open-minded about, as you would call it, woo-woo, because actually I've done EFT and energy psychology and, you know, looked at all those sorts of things. And actually there's an enormous amount of practitioner research that backs up, you know, the efficacy of the results, actually, never mind the process itself. So I'm going to be open-minded on behalf of everybody else. But let's start by, well, you talked about being a spiritual coach. What do you mean by spirit in that case?
Oh, this is a great question. No one has ever asked me this question. This is a great question. No, spectacular. Love it. So what I mean by spirit in that case is your spirit, right? So a lot of times when we look outside ourselves for that definition of spirit, you come up with various names. So they range from different ways of saying God, right? And outside of you, deity that one, you know, relates to. They all the way through sort of calling things the universe or saying that there are laws of the universe and we're going to rely on those, right? So all of that is outside of you.
Yeah.
And the work for me in the word, particularly with the word spirit, is about your spirit. So there's something magical that happens, not really magical, between when you are able to create space between that part of you that you've felt throughout your life, right? And your body, which you have a sensation has changed throughout your life. Most people, unless you're, well, even if you're 12, right? You've changed a lot already, recently. And that part of you that is your brain. So we think thoughts and we know what that sensation is. And we have physical sensations and we can say, okay, I am experiencing that, right? So there's space in there. And we're able to turn both of those things off at any point, right? Through meditation, or people have done it through isolation tanks and all sorts of, you know, really want to experience what is it without this physical body and without our thoughts. And there is some piece of you that is separate from that.
Right.
Actually, one of my favorite ways that I heard it explained or illustrated for me is when my brother was about, I think he was about 40, maybe. My father was about 60. And my brother saw my father's body going through changes, right? And he said to my dad, what's it like to be your age? And my father said to him, it is exactly like being your age, except my body is different. And so that really gives an indication of how we feel that separation between you, the you that doesn't get impacted by those things, and you, the you that is showing up in the world in your physical body.
Right. So I like that. That makes sense, actually. It's almost this word spirituality gets in the way in a funny sort of way, because you seem to be talking about, and maybe this is why this word's here, because you seem to be talking about a combination of soul, identity, and life force. Is that fair?
Yes, I like those words. Yes. I would have said soul, And I love the idea of life force, because that is the piece of you that is in this present time.
But
So that's great.
identity is that idea, isn't it? Which is, whichever age you are, I am the person within, almost. And, you know, this is where we get into all sorts of challenging issues around things like gender and all that sort of stuff, because that's part of identity as well. So that's sort of it's quite an interesting idea that your practice will be covering those things off, really.
It is an interesting idea, because the concept of identity is, who am I in the world?
Not who am I to myself?
I would question, is there an answer to that question without relationship?
So you say I'm defined by everybody else. So in other words, I only can define myself when I come into contact with others. Otherwise, it's almost philosophical, isn't it? Because otherwise, I'm just an idea.
In terms of identity, I would agree with that. In terms of soul, of something that is beyond this physical experience, even though we're in this physical experience, then I would say, no, it is not relational. And maybe that is the way to kind of think about it, is this is the part of you that is not relational to this world. And yet your body, your brain, your thoughts, your identity, your ego are all relational, right? Yes. Who I am has to do with, well, let's take gender. I mean, this is outside my my normal scope, because I work with business people usually, but let's go with it and just kind of explore for a moment that the concept of gender identification, the concept of gender doesn't exist except for in a physical experience, right? Yeah. So tapping into that part of you that is non-physical, right? That exists outside the boundaries of that normal. So outside of the relational existence.
But what's really great about what you're talking about, you're grounding this in something that's easy to understand, rather than some sort of, I mean, I love this idea of having it within rather than without, because it does remove this whole concept of, like you say, deities and woo-woo and all that sort of stuff. So it makes sense to me when you're saying things like, at a very practical level, if I'm working in the business and I have to make a decision, knowing who I am will, and you know, normally it's described as beliefs or something along those lines, but I'm guessing you're thinking this is something more profound than beliefs.
Well, beliefs are based on experience, right? So when you come into the world, generally you have very few beliefs, right? Yeah. Children don't generally run around and have deep beliefs about things. Yeah. You gain that experience over time and you say, oh, this is the way it works. Oh, I understand how that part relates to each other. And right, and you work out your beliefs, or you're given your beliefs through your family relationships and that kind of thing. Yeah. So beliefs are something we practice, where if you're able to tap into that space that is outside of that, then, which I realize is kind of, it's a intangible, right? And in a way, I'm avoiding all the kind of normal words that you would use on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they carry with them. Yeah, somebody wrote a book about it, and now you have a concept of what that is. And really, what I would propose that you really take a look at is tapping into that piece of you that is unexplored and that is in a way feels eternal, right? I don't know what happens when we go. Yes. So that's not part of it, but it feels like, oh, I am unimpacted, the I that is inside, right?
Yes, that makes sense. And I like the way you're thinking about this, because what you're doing is you're putting it outside of cognition. So what you're saying is actually everything else was just neuroscience, and you're also avoiding some of those very dodgy areas like the God spot and the 45 hertz stuff. Yes. So that makes sense. So therefore I'm thinking, okay, if you're a spiritual health coach, I can get this. But what you're basically saying is, how am I healthy? And actually the manifestation of that health is my thoughts and my physical sensations and my behaviors, because if I'm healthy as an organism or as an individual, all that starts to look after itself. Now, here's the question. Most of us are working in organizations I mean, how enlightened do you need to be as an organization to be able to think of this way and get your people to optimize themselves? Because I'm guessing if you optimize a person at this level, productivity and performance is going to improve. So in other words, how do you structure an organization to make this happen?
Right. So before I go there, I want to kind of lay out one of the methods that I teach, and so that you can get a sense of how it might relate in the real world outside of our thoughts, right? Yeah. And that is, so the place that I always love to start with people is the AAA method of transformation. Right. So the AAA, right, the 3 A's are awareness, which we've been talking about here. Yeah. And then assessment. So you can really make an accurate assessment once you get that awareness. Yeah. And most of the time when people have an awareness like that, they say, oh, yes, I'm aware I have a problem and I don't like it, right? But not that inner awareness. So once you get a true awareness and an accurate assessment, meaning you're able to get sort of a global view so that you can make a decision that is not from a very specific vantage point, right? Yeah. Then your adaptation is really true adaptation rather than just random action, right? You've adapted to whatever that new scenario is in your work life. Yeah. And that process, when you really learn that process and learn the tools that will help you through that process, then implementing it is really easy, right? It's like baking, right? You just follow the recipe and there you go. And so when you say, how do you extend that to a company? I typically work actually with individuals, right? And I find that offering something like this inside a company, obviously it's much easier if the company is actually a conscious company, right? Is saying we care how we exist in the world and what the resources we use are and how we treat one another and all of those things, if there's already a basis there. Yeah. But let's pretend that you're in the worst possible situation and you're like, this place is soulless and I don't know if I can take it another day, right? That to do this work gives you a perspective on that place, that work area, those people, that can shift your relationship to it exponentially. And I'm going to give you an example, if you don't mind. Okay, so years ago, I was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation, okay? And so as the CEO, there were moments that were very, very pressure-filled, right? Yeah. And I felt that pressure. So we were having this kind of several day long negotiation with a vendor. And they had beat me up. They had totally beat me up the day before. I was wounded. I was like, I can't do it. I am not cut out from the same cloth that the people who fall into that soulless category is, right? Right, that place where people run hiding, yeah. And the next day, I woke up very, very early, and I was sitting at my kitchen counter thinking, okay, how are we going to get through this day? Please let me get through. And I saw my 2 kittens at the time playing. And what they were playing was how to kill one another, right? So they were gladiators and they were just trying to kill each other. I mean, it started out with a bell ball and then they were like, and I thought, oh my goodness, they're really going to hurt themselves and each other. And then all of a sudden I look back and they're licking each other, having the best time. And I thought, oh, my whole world just shifted. I got that kaleidoscope moment where I understood that some people don't mean the words the way that I mean the words. And some people are playing a game, and they mean it that way. They don't mean I hate you and all of the things that it feels like when you're in those kinds of situations. Yeah. And it's why they're able to walk away from a negotiation and then go to dinner together and things like that, where you're just like, how is this possible, right? Yeah. We just were at each other's throats. But those kinds of deep perspective shifts where you can really get a sense of what really is my environment. And what is the way in me that I can make a shift so that I, at the very least, survive in this well, right?
Yeah.
But thrive in this environment,
Yeah.
because it could be fun. And in fact, negotiation from that moment forward for me was actually really fun.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to leave anybody bloody, right?
Sure.
I didn't have to play the game the way they were playing it, but I was able to find a way that fit me.
Yeah. So in a say, that's sort of a form of resilience in a way, where you go away, you've been knocked down, and then what you've done is because what you've done there is you've taken accountability for who you were there at that moment, haven't you? And a lot of people would have spent a lot of time just blaming the other people and saying they're horrible, they're nasty, they shouldn't have done this, don't they realize how important I am, blah, 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 rather than saying, actually, I got this bit wrong, or this bit hasn't been working well for me. And that's how you learn, isn't it? And that's how you begin to be resilient. I would contend. I don't know if you agree.
I totally agree. And I also think that that's that piece about awareness is really necessary for that resilience,
Yes.
right? To be able to sort of look at your situation and say, well, I'm the only one I have any control over.
Yeah.
So let's start with me.
Yeah. But we do get those people, don't we, who like to blame everybody else. And I wonder if those people who are blaming everybody else, now this is interesting, do you think that's because they haven't found their soul, spirit, identity, life force? Because I don't know what to call it now.
Yeah, of course we don't. So no, I don't. I think that when, this is my personal opinion, right? This is not, I'm not telling anybody, this is their
There's not a dictionary definition of this, is there? Let's be honest, so that's good.
Right. Yeah. So I personally believe that we come into this world and we are totally connected to ourselves. We have all of that, right? We don't have a mechanism that has us blame everybody. We don't have a mechanism that, like, we're just experiencing, we're fully present, right? And from that moment forward, we have experiences that form our belief system. So we watch, right? We watch adults. We say, oh, look, that one got hurt. And then she says, that's his fault. And, oh, okay. And over here, that one got hurt the same way, but they said that it's not that fault. And you make those connections. And now we get into the science of it, right? That you spoke of earlier with the neuroscience of it, and sort of making those connections over and over and over again, creating the little super highways, right, for the neurons in your brain, make belief. And once you've got those beliefs, it's very hard to change them. Usually it comes from, as full-grown adults, it comes from trauma. You can have trauma, right? A trauma could be, I got fired. I mean, it doesn't have to be a physical trauma. It comes from intense disappointment, right? So not necessarily in the category of trauma, but I can't go on this way. I know I'm not feeling good and I need to make a change.
It's like a realization.
So really, in my personal opinion, you get from that sort of bright, shiny little baby to someone who is living a life that is not really working for your benefit, isn't joyous, through those built beliefs. And if you're willing at that moment to say, I will start over, I will do something different, then that willingness can take you into a whole new phase of life.
Yes, that's interesting. I wonder if it explains the sort of human need for meaning, because it's one of the things that, you know, you often find when you talk to people about burnout, they lose that sense of meaning. They lose that sense of who they are. They lose their life force, don't they, in a strange sort of way. Their efficacy drops, but also their ability to take something from the event or something from the occasion. So do you think that's explaining that sort of issue?
I like it. I like those words that you're using. Yes, I like it. I particularly like the phrase "who you are." So who you really are, right? I'm fond of that because it gives you a sense that you have to stop and think about who you are. And I do think that people who are in burnout and in real tough times. Grief can do it. There's a lot of different scenarios that can cause that questioning of the worth of this experience here on earth. And I do think that really does, that not tapping into that space in you is a big piece of that burnout.
And I think there's another part of it as well, which sort of leads us into another subject perhaps, which is this idea of, and I don't think we talk enough about this idea of corporate grief that comes from actually the achievement of something. Now you and I were talking earlier, and we talked about both having a background in the performing arts, so we'll come to this. And I worked in West End theatres, Broadway and such like. You come to the end of a very successful run, and then at the end of it, the theatre closes and the show comes off. And then you have burnout that comes from that, because actually you haven't got anything else. And that's very similar to business, isn't it? You often find burned out executives who've actually been CEOs and they've overachieved, and then they're going, well, what now then?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's not just trauma, isn't it? It's almost, you can be successful and lose your sense of purpose. You lose your sense of who I was because I haven't reinvented or discovered or thought about who I'm going to be as I go to the next chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And I love that you bring theater into it, because I do think it's a fantastic mechanism to look at the world through. And like you said, I worked on Broadway. And so I feel like I got to do that. I had the privilege of doing that with people who had practiced a lot and who were very good at it. Yeah. And so you knew that what was happening felt like it was happening in that space that you talked about. I'm very successful, and yet still.
Yeah.
So I'm going to draw a correlation for you that may be unpopular.
Go on, go for it.
But life is really fun, right? Yeah. When you describe a success, it's really fun. You go like, yes, we're doing it. We're having the big Broadway experience show, or we're growing that company from X to Y and it's a big deal, right? Or we finally got that contract and we all pushed together to get it done.
Yeah.
And so life is really fun. It can be super fun, right?
Yeah.
But it is fun from outside of us.
Yes,
right? Agreed. So it's very, very easy in the really good times to lose track of who you really are.
Yeah, I agree.
But it doesn't, totally agree. It's a funny thing, right? Because we think like, well, it makes sense to me that if you're lost, if you feel depressed, if you feel worried, that's a time that you feel like I don't really have a good sense of that part of me that is tapped in, but in joy, we can also do the same thing.
Yes, so, I think you're right. I think the dopamine hijacks you, doesn't it, as much as the serotonin, and you can be addicted to success. But the problem is you're addicted, and it doesn't matter what you're addicted to. The addiction thing is the problem here. So you're right. The external thing, it's measuring yourself in the wrong. It's just a different set of measures, and they're all external. I think that's what you're saying. I think you and I are going to spend half an hour violently agreeing with each other. I think this is the challenge here, isn't it? Just using different words.
I love that you're exploring different words, because I really take an approach where, there are lots and lots of different roads that lead to where you want to go. Yeah. Right. And so the idea that there are lots and lots of different words that can be used to sort of flesh out the ideas and really give them a deeper meaning for you, the person who's experiencing the words, is important, right? Because when you just say one way of saying it, then it's a capsule. But once you start really poking at it, then it becomes really fleshed out. And I think that's wonderful. So.
I agree. And I have to say that those of you who can't see you on video didn't realize at the very stage you're talking about Broadway, you did do a fantastic set of jazz hands there. So I'd like to see you living it. So give me an example, or give me a couple of examples of the sort of work you do and how that manifests itself.
Right. So often I work with people so this relationship that we're talking about, right? So we've kind of gone into this I'm trying to think of how far deep I can take you into this. So we've talked a little bit about the AAA method.
Yeah.
And when you take that and go deeper into that relationship in real coaching scenario, right? So we're really responding to one another, and there's a way of getting into a space together, not physical. Then the types of things that can shift in your world are, it really manifests in so many different ways. People have, of course, personal successes out of it, as well as professional successes. But some of the things that I find are big impediments for the business people that I work with is really a sense of self-confidence. And like you said earlier, so interesting, has nothing to do with success, right? There are very, very, very successful people that I've worked with who still have a self-confidence issue.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and you might argue it's why they're successful.
Yeah, that's right. That's partly it is. Partly it is because there's a looking outside of yourself for something, right?
Yeah. And so you keep coming back to this thing, don't you? You keep coming back to this idea that this fleshing out of what's outside versus what's inside is the key. So I'm guessing that it's almost gestalt work, isn't it? You're really getting to the heart, self-awareness, self-control, self-regulation, all those sorts of things. You look at my model behind me, you can see that little grid there, which has got regulation written all over it. And it's that bit, isn't it? It's that really knowing yourself. And if you know yourself, you're much more able to have better relationships. You're going to be able to weather the storm. You're going to have better negotiations, because actually you're basing your foundations on some degree of certainty, rather than something airy-fairy like spirit, he says, coming around to the subject.
and you're basing it on something that is real for you, that is always in your control.
Yes.
Right.
Now, when you change your brand, I
absolutely agree. It's not really Gestalt work, because I'm not trained in that work, but it is very, very similar in that the results are the same and the approach is very similar.
Yeah. When you change your brand to Life Force, I'll be coming for my 15%.
Okay.
So there are people I meet every now and then where I know I can spend a number of hours talking to them, and actually I have to feel sorry for the podcast audience who are thinking, oh my goodness, stop this now already, let that poor woman go. So if people would like to find out more about your skills and services, and you'll notice as soon as you go onto Donnalynn's site, actually, that there's Fox, ABC, NBC, CBS, and all sorts of groovy stuff going on there. But how can we find out more about you? How can we find you? What can we find, and where?
Thank you. Yes. So I think the best place is the website. So DonnallynnRiley.com. So, and I don't know, do you have a way to do a link for them? But Riley,
we'll do a lot. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Then we'll just tell you to click the link. But it's DonnallynnRiley.com. And I leave the updates there. In fact, you can even see some of the current Facebook feed and things like that. So you can really tap in. Also, I do run a Facebook group, a private Facebook group that is free for anyone who is interested in this kind of work. I do weekly trainings in it for free. So you can really kind of get the sense of what we're doing here and what the impact of that is, and how you can use it in your own life. And that is, I think, the easiest. Well, on Facebook, I am Donnalynn Riley.
Yeah.
So same name, same way, same spelling, everything. And the group name is Uplift and Activate.
Okay.
So,
I think I may have joined you.
Oh, fantastic.
Hey! And it can also be found on LinkedIn, because I found you there. Although
yes.
you won't let me join you there. So that's all I'm saying. You're obviously much more
I'd be happy to let you join me. I'm very good at LinkedIn.
I know what you mean. So, and then of course, then your website is Donnalynn, and that's one word, DonnallynnRiley.com.
Yes, that's correct. That's
fantastic.
Correct.
Excellent. Well, okay, brilliant. That's been fascinating, and how interesting. So, It is interesting when you see, so in other words, if you bump into Donnalynn's site or Facebook or whatever it might be, you don't need to be put off by this word spiritual. Actually, what you've demonstrated really well here is that actually spiritual is nothing to be frightened of in this sense, because you're talking about something which is just about the inner world versus the outer. And I think that's a brilliant place to
Yes.
get comfort from.
Yes, often I interchange it a little bit with the word emotions, because I think people relate to having emotions. But if you've got a better one, maybe I'm going to go for life force soon.
Yeah.
I could talk to you for like days. We could just put the camera on and we could talk for days. You know that, right?
Yeah, I'm rebranding at the moment. So there
I
you
like that.
Donnalynn, it's been an absolute joy to talk to you, and thank you so much for your time.
Mine as well. Thank you.
You take care. Hi everybody. I hope you found that episode useful and interesting. Feedback is always welcomed, and if you are in the mood to subscribe to us or even leave a comment on iTunes or Stitcher, that would be amazing. If you want to suggest ideas or even people you would like me to interview, then reach out to us at qedod.com/contact. As I said earlier, you can go to qedod.com/podcasts for show notes or follow the links. And you can go to qedod.com/extras to access offers, tools and resources, including free articles and ebooks. For those of you that would be interested in supporting our work and contributing more proactively, you can find our new Patreon page at patreon.com. Then search for Resilience Unravelled. I look forward to being in your ear next time around. Take care.